Hello everyone, I'm Xiao from the University of Science and Technology of China. The title of my paper is Extracting Unit Embeddings Using Sequence-to-Sequence Acoustic Models for Unit Selection Speech Synthesis. First, let's take a look at the introduction of the paper. Recently, the idea of driving unit embedding for unit selection speech synthesis has been investigated very recently. The unit embedding is defined as a fixed length vector for a phone-sized unit with variable length in a corpus. Its purpose is to model the relationship among the units for calculating cost functions. Some methods extracted the unit embeddings from the intermediate layer in BLSTM or other speech controller input features shared between acoustic and context prediction breaks, or using a simple SPSS model. Our previous work proposed a unit vector model to learn the phone-level acoustic unit embeddings from scratch. After training, unit vector learns a representational matrix of R times D of all units in a corpus, where R is the total number of the unit candidates in a corpus, and D is the length of the unit embedding. Then, the representational matrix was used to train cost calculation functions. The FT and FC are the two phone-level DA models which modeling cost functions. The FT model simply maps the linguistic features to unit embedding. The CTAC function measures the overall acoustic difference between a candidate unit and a target unit, which can be used as a part of a target cost for unit selection. The FC model maps the linguistic features and the preceding unit embedding to unit embedding. Third, C-coin is calculated to measure the long-term dependencies among consecutive phone candidates. However, the method still has two deficiencies. First, the remaining vectors are only learned from frame-level acoustic features. The duration and context characteristics of units are ignored. Second, separate DL model is required to model the unit embeddings for target cost calculation. With the development of natural network-based statistical parametric speech synthesis, end-to-end models have been proposed, such as Tacotron on the right, which adopts a sequence-to-sequence framework to combine front-end text analysis, duration modeling, and acoustic modeling. Its encoder maps input phone sequence into fixed-length hidden representations, which are then sent into an attention-based decoder to predict acoustic feature frame by frame. Therefore, this paper proposes to utilize the output vectors of Tacotron encoder as unit embeddings for unit selection speech synthesis. This proposed method has three advantages. First, the output vectors of the Tacotron encoder contain not only acoustic, but also duration and context information of phone units. Second, the unit embeddings are derived in a context-dependent way, according to the mapping relationship between a cool linguistic feature sequence and a cool acoustic feature sequence. Third, the unit embeddings are derived from linguistic features using the encoder, which means the Tacotron is capable to directly map the text into unit embeddings as FT doing. Then, we talk about our proposed methods. The flowchart shows the unit selection method with the unit embedding extracted by Tacotron. First, we use a pair of speech and labels to train Tacotron. Then, given labels for Tacotron, each candidate unit in the corpus is represented by a unit embedding. Therefore, the representational matrix was used to train GC model to measure the long-term dependencies among consecutive phone candidates. Finally, the Tacotron model and GC are utilized in unit selection. In Tacotron2 encoder, the phone sequences are represented by the embedding vectors and then are passed through a sequence of three convolution layers, then passed into a single BLSTM. The two directional hidden state vectors of the BLSTM are concatenated to obtain the hidden vector HT as a T-phone. Investigating the calculation formula of LSTM, the range of FT is -1 to 1. Our Tacotron model is estimated. Each phone size candidate unit in the corpus is represented by a fixed length unit embedding. Similarly, Each touch unit to be synthesized is also converted into a unit embedding of the same dimension by encoding the input phone sequences. Compared with our previous work, FT is not needed anymore. In addition to learn and model the unit embedding, phone-level DL model GC is also needed to measure the long-term dependencies among consecutive phone candidates. Its architecture is the same as FC shown in preceding slide. GC model predicts the unit embedding of a current phone given the unit embeddings of preceding phones and the context features of a current target. This is how to calculate the touch cost and concatenation cost using Tacotron encoder output. Let Tn denote the unit embedding of the nth phone unit in the touched sentences to be synthesized, and Dn denote the unit embedding of nth candidate units. The function detect is adopted to get the candidate units for dynamic programming search. The final touch cost function for unit selection includes detect, the negative log likelihood of phone durations, and the Kullback-Leibler divergence of the context-dependent distributions corresponding to the mere substrate coefficients, f0s, and phone durations. The final concatenation cost function is the weighted sum of the decoy and the negative log likelihoods of the differentials of MCCs and f0s. We look at experiments of our paper. Our dataset is about 17.51 hours measuring speech. It was split in the training set of 11,608 utterances, a validation set of 611 utterances, and the test set of 100 utterances. The training set was used to train Tacotron and GC for cost calculation. The training set and the validation set were merged together to provide candidate units for unit selection, and the total number of phone instances was 459,750. When training the Tacotron2 model in our proposed method, instead of using Chinese character sequences directly, phoneme sequences were adopted as input. A phoneme embedding vector, a tone embedding vector, and a prosodic position embedding vector were concatenated to represent each phoneme. The dimension of unit embedding was 256. Finally, three systems using our proposed method were built as follows. Proposal. This system was introduced in the preceding slide. Proposed TC. The unit preselection and the touch cost calculation were the same as proposal, and the concatenation cost calculation was the same as the baseline system. Proposed PS. The unit preselection was the same as the proposed O, while the touch cost and the concatenation cost calculation were the same as the baseline system. This figure shows the phone-dependent distributions of the unit embedding extracted from Tacotron encoder and unit-to-vector using TSync. From this figure, we can see the Tacotron encoder generated more unit embedding clusters for each phone type than the unit vector model. One possible reason is that the Tacotron model was estimated using not only frame-level acoustic features, but also linguistic features in a sequence-to-sequence manner. Thus, the embedding extracted from the Tacotron encoder has stronger context dependency than the one from unit-to-vector. In order to investigate the performance of the learning embeddings on carrying duration information, a duration prediction experiment was conducted. 3D models were constructed which adopts the unit embeddings learned by unit vector, the unit embedding learned by Tacotron, and the phone level 913-dimension linguistic features as input, respectively. The output of this model was represented by a 6-dimensional vector, which was composed of the durations of one phone and its 5 HMM states. We can see the phone duration RMSE of using the unit embedding learned from Tacotron was much smaller than the one using unit vector, which was close to the accuracy of prediction durations from linguistic features. In terms of predicting state durations, these two unit embeddings achieved similar accuracy. One possible reason is that states are hidden units, and the Tacotron model paid more attention to the transitions between phonemes than between states. In order to investigate the performance of the learned unit bending on carrying acoustic information, we randomly selected 300 pairs of candidate units for each phone type and calculated the acoustic distance together with the unit bending distance for each pair. Here, the acoustic distance was calculated as the Euclidean distance between the average mean spectrograms of a pair of units. From this figure, we can see that the distances among the unit bendings learned from Tacotron demonstrate a better correlation with acoustic distances than the ones learned from unit vector. In the subjective evaluation, we can see that proposal system outperformed the baseline system significantly. However, there was no significant performance among the two systems in other three tests. This result indicates that modifying single model among unit preselection and coarse calculation using the unit bendings learned from Tacotron may not improve the naturalness of the synthetic speech. However, significant improvement can be achieved if the three models are modified using the proposed unit bendings simultaneously. The demos can find in website shown in QR code. So this paper proposes to utilize the output vectors of Tacotron encoder as unit bendings for unit selection speech synthesis. The learned unit bendings are first applied to unit preselection, touched coarse calculation, and concatenation coarse calculation. Subjective evaluation results demonstrate the effectiveness of a proposed method and show that the unit embeddings extracted from Tacotron contain acoustic, duration, and context information of phone units. Thanks for your attention. Do you have any questions?